Hello, this is Valpor Drakerider, and today I'm going to be showing you my newest finished project. It is a Castle Magic interactive experience, but it's a bit unlike my previous projects. This is a Seafaring Treasure Hunt. Now, I'm not the biggest fan of the fact that when you move an item with Castle Magic, you are unable to stick to it and use it as a vehicle. Making flying platforms, which the player has to constantly run on, has always been a frustration of mine. So I decided that I wanted to make an experience which moves the environment around you to simulate your movement through it. So that's exactly what we have here with our pirate ship as a vessel. So we're going to be exploring this area to hunt for hidden treasure. However, this video will not be a walkthrough. The intention of this video is to establish the premise of the hunt. I will be creating another video to go through a walkthrough for those who don't expect to be able to run through the house on their own. So for now, I'm just going to be showing you the basic mechanics of the house and explaining how it works without getting into the puzzle aspects of it. So, when you first enter in, you'll notice that there is an ocean environment around you with multiple islands off in the distance. Immediately in front of you on your boat, you'll have a button on your mast, and you'll have a button under your front compass. Now the compass will rotate you to a new facing, and you can keep rotating all the way around to establish which direction you would like to go. The compass will remain pointing north for the entirety of your stay, so that you never forget which direction is north. So if you get stuck like this, which is a common enough problem, you can go ahead and jump. Jumping once will teleport you out of the boat, as if you were jumping out of the boat. This is what allows you to enter nearby islands. You can only walk within a short area surrounding your boat, and jumping again will jump you right back into your boat. So let's go ahead and rotate the boat right back around to a north facing and get some movement going. So, as we wait for the movement to finish, we can get a look at just how good it looks. So immediately you can see ocean rocks passing by, and the islands getting just a little bit closer. There we have our first island entering in through the fog. And then once the buttons reappear and the movement has stopped, we can initiate movement once again. The movement goes in 36-second intervals and moves the player, or rather moves the environment 3,500 units in a particular direction. So, once our island has reached us, we can go ahead and disembark from our boat and go check it out. So, not to give away anything regarding the puzzle, but at the very beginning there's nothing you can do on this island. Nothing whatsoever. This is just to give players a taste of what is going on exactly and have an island close enough to quickly encounter. Now, to show you movement in another direction, we might decide that we want to move to the east to get closer to that rock formation over there. So now you can see the entirety of the environment will move against us as we travel to the east. So, we arrive at our rock formation. We can disembark. There's a cave entrance through the rocks. And it leads to sort of a shipwreck cave. So this, of course, will be an essential segment of the puzzle, just to give a slight preview. But I will not interact with anything. I'll leave that to you guys, or I'll leave it to the walkthrough video. So then we can go ahead and visit our last island. And I think that will be the last thing that I will show off as far as the islands and scenery in this video goes. However, there is a bit more to see in the walkthrough video. And here is our final island. So we have a nice cabin, fishing rod, some fish, a little palm tree grove, just a nice, quaint little island. Now, as far as the actual castle magic mechanics themselves go, the movement system for the bow is essentially made out of 3 basic components. The first of those components is the Directional Selection system. This is the system that controls the boat's orientation so that it faces to one of the 4 cardinal directions. So this is effectively what happens every time you press the button to activate the compass. So, what is happening is that button down there, which you cannot see, it's underneath the bow, is adding 1 to your first counter over here. This is very similar to my counter selection system that you would have seen in my game of chess. So when 1 is added to it, and it equals its test value of 1, it's going to activate its corresponding reflector. In this case, it's on the other side of the sail, you can't quite see it, but it's activating really a chain of reflectors. And what each of them is doing is rotating the boat and moving objects that need to be moved to retain the shape of the ship. It's doing a few other things that we'll get into as we talk about the other different systems. So, for example, it relates into our next system via these computers. So when I activate this counter, so the first rotation, which we go counterclockwise to the west first, it's going to be adding a signal to this computer, which tells the button, which corresponds to moving in that direction, to turn visible, so that you can move in that direction. When you select the compass again to turn the ship then to the south, it's going to go over value, which is going to activate the next counter, and subsequently the next set of reflectors for the next movement. And this is going to continue on the pattern. There aren't 4 counters, despite there being 4 cardinal directions, because the last one is going to set the first counter to 0. When the first counter is set to 0, it is under value, which is what will activate the final chain for the final rotation. So, now we get over to the actual movement initiation system. So the movement initiation system, which stems from using the 4 mast buttons, works as so. So we're going to go ahead and look at the south portion, because each of the portions is actually pretty much identical. So when you activate your south button, it's going to trigger this reflector, which is going to tell its corresponding timer to start. It's also going to remove the signal from the computer so that it turns invisible, or rather the computer turns the button that you pressed invisible. It will also turn the rotation button invisible. So the timer that it starts is just going to continuously activate its corresponding reflector, which is in charge of the entire chain of reflectors that initiates the movement of every single item. So you can see there's tons of reflectors off in the distance at each of the island clusters, and those are the reflectors which hold the actual movement spells that is targeted onto each and every item. So each and every item has a reflector targeted to it with a spell for each cardinal direction. So, the next thing that's going to happen is it's going to add 1 to this counter here. And this counter acts as a limitation system. So it's going to stop your timer when it equals value at 14. 14 times 250 is 3,500 units. So each movement will take you, or rather the environment around you, a distance of 3,500 units. So when it equals value, it's going to target its corresponding reflector, which will stop the timer, preventing it from moving further. However, at this point, the buttons do not turn back to being visible. The reason for this is that there were so many activations for moving the different objects that by the time the timer is stopped, they haven't finished moving the full 3,500 distance. So it's going to also start this timer, which is going to act as a buffer before turning on the buttons for changing movement. So after 22 seconds and an extra second for rotation, every object will have finally stopped and your buttons will reappear. However, there is an instance when your movement button will not reappear, and that kind of ties into our next system here. So our next system is also the least item consuming of the 3, and it is the boundary system. So these 4 counters, all on their own, are preventing this system from allowing you to go out of a boundary that I have set. So the boundary is a 5x5 grid of 3,500 by 3,500 squares. So each space is a square of 3,500 by 3,500 to match with our movement. Early on, I had actually created a grid of long blue runners to help me visualize this, so that I could place my islands accordingly where I wanted them to be. So, essentially the way that this boundary system works is that when a player chooses one of these mast buttons to move in a specific direction, it's going to add 1 to a counter that corresponds with that direction. Once that counter hits its max test value of 4, it's going to remove signal 2 from the corresponding computer, preventing the button from turning visible again after the movement has been completed. However, you can still rotate the boat in order to pick a different direction to move. Once you move in the opposite direction of the direction which you can no longer go, it will subtract 1 from that counter, and when it is under value, it's going to add signal 2 back to that computer, allowing the button to turn visible once again. So that's really all there is to the boundary system. It is very effective, and I'm very pleased with it. It can be used for a lot of different things, but certainly it doesn't do well with things that have spaces you are not supposed to move in within a grid. It needs to be a full grid in order to be very effective. So that about sums it up for the actual movement system of the bow. There are a few other systems which I can explain, being much simpler, of course. So for example, the system for jumping in and out of the boat is reliant on this jump detector paired with this computer. So essentially what is happening is when you jump, this magic jump detector is toggling the signal of this computer. So this computer is acting as a lever, switching between two modes. So when it is when signal 1 or 2 is present, it's going to activate one reflector, so it's going to activate the reflector outside of the boat. And when signal 1 is not present, it's going to activate the reflector inside the boat. Now each of these reflectors is going to summon a separate jump detector to them. Each jump detector corresponds with the opposite reflector so that the player can jump to the correct location. So when a player jumps, so let's say you are inside of the boat and you jump, what's going to happen is it's going to activate this reflector down here. It's going to teleport a new jump detector to it, restore the position of the original jump detector far away from the boat, and it's going to make one item visible and one invisible. So essentially, kind of the way that works is, let's say that you're standing in the ship and you jump out of the boat. The platform is going to appear below you as you teleport out, and the ice patch in the boat, which allows you to walk on the boat, is actually going to disappear simultaneously. This ensures that you can't walk up onto the boat or fall off of the boat and get stuck inside of it. So that's how that system basically works. This stuff back here is just chaining to environmental changes. So for example, this chain is doing singular actions, so it might be adding one signal to some of my computers, or adding to the counters to give them their starting position to correspond with where the boat is at the beginning. This chain here is growing or shrinking things to their max size, and this one right here is growing or shrinking things or activating things 3 times. And those chain throughout the entire build. You can see a little bit more spoilers over there, but you won't get to see how that actually looks unless you do the walkthrough video, or you go ahead and go through it yourself. So essentially, that is how the basic components of my little expedition goes here. So, if you enjoyed this, consider leaving a like or subscribing. But rather, thank you for being here today and checking out my house. If you are interested in trying it out, I intend to put it on tour, so hopefully it does well. Otherwise, you can contact me directly, and we can work something out. Alrighty then, I hope you enjoyed, and I'll see you next time. Bye-bye.